Hey friends, Mindy here. I'm going to be setting up my journal for Take Heed from Bythewell4God. I pulled out this old journal. This was for handcrafted, and this is the kind of binding that I'm going to be doing today. This is called a Twine binding. This is a no-sew binding, and so I'm able to just do this pretty quickly. So I have, as always, a Wheat Thins box here, and I'm just going to trim this down. I'm going to start out by trimming off all of the flaps. I just opened it up so that basically the box was entirely flat. You just open up that one seam on there. I'm going to use my X-Acto knife and the steel-edged part of my Tim Holtz ruler here. And I'm just going to go down and trim off all of these little cardboard flaps, all the excess pieces. And usually I use a box cutter, but I couldn't find mine, so I'm just using my X-Acto knife today. So I'm just having to kind of make a couple passes. Doing that is better. Doing a couple shallow passes is just better than just trying to do it in one swoop. So this is going to be my journal. I did cut it down in height to about 6 inches. That's going to give me just the height that I want for this particular journal. I'm using the fabric that coordinated with the kit from Bythewell4God. I'm going to use this floral one and then the other more neutral one. It's because these are like 10 by 12 in size, and so it's not going to be quite big enough to cover and wrap my my cover. So I'm starting out with taking this floral fabric and I'm going to cut it in half. This is going to be the front and back pieces, and then I will have that other piece of fabric as the coordinating piece that wraps around the spine. So what I'm going to do actually is use this heat and bond. I've done this before on my channel. In fact, I'll link the video for handcrafted down below because it's the same exact process. I'm just not doing any of the ironing and stuff on camera. So I used the heat and bond and I ironed it to the fabric. That's what creates that like shiny side on this. This is a way that you can kind of turn a fabric, any like thinner fabric, into a book cloth so that you can do so that you can wrap a book. You could actually at this point use liquid adhesive if you wanted to, but since it's heat and bond, I'm just gonna go ahead and iron it, and it will iron right onto the this chipboard from this box. So I'm cutting down the middle section here. I went ahead and just put heat and bond on all of this fabric because even if I use it later for another thing, you know, for an accent or something in my journal as I'm working through Take Heed, I can still use the fabric in the same way. I can put glue behind it. I could iron it. I could, you know, so it's not going to go to waste since I put the heat and bond on there. So I just need to trim down this little spine section here. I didn't get it cut quite all the way through there. And then I just am going to save all of that to use in my journal as I go. And I'm just kind of lining things up here, just getting an eye for where everything is going to fall. And I'm realizing at this point that I have a little bit too much fabric. I mean, I could wrap it, but it's just going to be a lot of kind of wasted fabric. So I'm actually going to trim these pieces down so that I have about, I want to say maybe like a 1/2 inch around the edge that I can then, you know, wrap this box in. And so that will also give me some more of this fabric, little kind of just pieces that I can use again in my journal so that there's no real waste to any of that. So I have those trimmed down, all 3 pieces. And so this is kind of how this is going to look. I'm going to go iron all of that down, and you just kind of follow the instructions for the heat and bond. I wrapped it just like I would wrap any other book. I cut the corners and just so that I had a like real nice miter on the inside. I did all of that in the same way that I have done before. I apologize I don't have that done on camera. My little craft iron was missing in action, so I was having to use my household iron, which I couldn't set up my camera there. So I decided to go ahead and use some more of this fabric since I already have the heat and bond on it to wrap on the inside. You can see how I just wrapped the front cover pieces around to the inside. And then so I'm going to actually just cut this down, and then I will go iron that on there. So that is my middle section. And then for the end papers part, I'm actually going to use the papers that coordinate with the kit. So I trimmed those down. I just measured the area and trimmed those down so that they will cover this little section. And there's still just a little bit of that fabric kind of peeking around the edge. And then just kind of wanted to keep this more neutral on the inside. So I'm going to use score tape, or this is the scrapbook.com version. This is the double-sided adhesive. It's really super sticky. You could use liquid, but because I was doing kind of going over the chipboard and the fabric, I just wanted to make sure I had a really strong adhesive. So I'm using this. I'm just going to put this down. I'm going to basically cover the entire piece of paper. I have this little section in the middle, but I have the same tape in a narrower size. So I'm just adding a couple strips of that. And then we're going to do that to the other piece as well. And now I'm going to adhere this down. One of the things I like to do is I'm going to pull up these two pieces in the center, and then for the other two larger pieces, I'm going to kind of create little flaps here. And that way I can make sure that I'm positioning this exactly where I want it before I press it down, because the score tape is really, really sticky. And so this is one of those ways you can kind of just maneuver this, and can see I was trying to figure out like which way I wanted this piece of paper facing. And so I'm kind of holding on to those little flaps and kind of using them. And then once I get it where I want it, then I push down in the middle, and then I pull the release paper the rest of the way out. And that way I can just get everything lined up really nice and easy. So that creates, or is basically the covering of my book here. And now I'm going to do the twine binding. So I have some baker's twine that I'm going to use, and you start with leaving some on the outside, because you need a good amount so that you can tie it off at the end. And then I'm going to wrap this around so that on the inside of the spine I have 14 sections. So I'm going to have one for every day of the devotional. So you can see I'm just going through here and counting and making sure that I have all 14. I also want to make sure that they're not overlapping. They're not super tight or anything. I'm just kind of making sure that I have a good space between them, but I want to make sure the most important thing is that they're not kind of wrapping over each other. So, and once I have that done, I'm just going to make sure, double check and count on the inside here again, just making sure that I have 14 on the inside here. And now I can go ahead and tie this. So you can see I just flipped this over, and I have my two pieces here. I'm just, again, making sure, and I cut this, so then I'm going to cross these on the outside of the threads. I'm just crossing them over each other, if that makes sense. So, and then you can see I have the two pieces here, and I'm just going to cross them over. And then I'm going to use my little tweezers here, but you could use a crochet hook or whatever. And I'm going to go underneath the threads now, and I'm going to pull that one over to the other side. And now you can see how it's just going to gather everything up. And I'm going to tie a bow right here. Now, I'm going to come back in a minute and readjust this, but for now I'm just holding that in place, and I'm going to put in the paper that's going to make my signatures, basically. So I have this is Bristol paper. It's the vellum surface, and it's 9x12 in size. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to just cut these in half using my little paper trimmer here. I'm not going to make you watch me do this for every page, but I have 7 pieces of paper. I'm cutting them in half. That's going to give me my 14 that I need. And then I'm going to take my scoreboard here, and each of these you can see will now be 9 inches. I'm going to score that at 4.5. And then that is going to make my signatures for each day of the devotional. And now I'm going to go through and fold them all. And I'm going to use my bone folder and just make that crease nice and even. And I just do this kind of assembly line. So I cut everything, I score everything, and now I'm folding all of them. And then I will add them into my book. I'm just making sure those creases are nice with my bone folder. And I have found it works best to start at the back. So I'm just putting this in through there and then flipping it over. And that's going to be like day 14. You can see I'm kind of working toward the front. This is just the easiest way once you get multiple pages in there. So I'm going to add all of my little pages, into my spine. This is just a great way too, because you can pull each day out. And because I've used like a heavy duty mixed media paper, I can do a lot with those. So you can see here, I have this bow that I tied, and now that I have all my papers in there, I'm just going to tighten this down a little bit. So I'm actually at this point going to tie just a square knot, and then I will tie a bow. This is usually where I put my my flare pin for the kit, or you could add anything on there if you wanted to. And I decided I wanted to add some corners. These are the Tim Holtz like photo corners or book corners. So I always like to add a little bit of glue just in case. So I'm using some Helmar 450 quick dry, just a little bit in there. And then you kind of fold it over with, you can do it with your fingers really. And then I'm just coming in with a pair of pliers, just making sure everything is nice and tight and flat. And I will do that for all 4 corners. I've done that on my channel before as well. And then I decided I wanted to add a little bit of trim also, kind of between those 2 pieces of fabric on the cover, mostly because on the one it was not completely straight, and I knew that would irritate me. So I can kind of disguise that a little bit by adding this trim. And so what I'm going to do, I cut it a little bit longer than what I need for right now, and I'm going to add, this is actually Fabri-Tac glue, right down that seam right there. And then I'm just going to glue the trim down and let that dry before I trim off the ends. Just want to make sure that it gets dry nice and straight. And then I'm going to come back in with some scissors, and I will trim that right up next to the edge of my cover. And I'm going to do that on both pieces of trim. And then I'm going to come in, just because this particular trim looks like it could fray really easily. So I'm going to take that same Fabri-Tac glue, and I'm just going to run a bead right along the edge. If you had fray check, I think is what it's called, you could add that on there, and that will keep it from fraying. So this is what my little book looks like. If you liked this video, I would appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and until next time, bye.